Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery. I'm Zara Altair, mystery author and writing coach. And today I want to talk about a new discovery I made, which I think is very freeing for developing your story before you actually sit down to write. And it's the written synopsis. First, I want to thank my patrons on Patreon for their continued support. It means a lot. It helps bring these videos to you and supports my writing. All right, so written synopsis, and that's handwritten. That's paper and pen, not on the computer. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I call it the personal synopsis because it's just for you. You don't have to think about your syntax or spelling or any of those things. So this is not a promotional synopsis. You're going to see a lot of information out there about writing a synopsis for an agent. That is not what this is. This is for you. This is to expand your mind and solidify and create story ideas. So you can stop here. Don't have to watch anymore if you're looking for how to write a synopsis for an agent and as part of your marketing package. Jane Friedman has a great article about it, which she continues to update, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. This synopsis is about writing for you, the author. Before you write the novel, it's a step between scene cards and writing. Writing a personal synopsis is like discovery writing from a plan. So I do plan. This isn't like just brainstorming discovery writing. I actually use Plotter to plan my story beats and outline subplots and generate character backgrounds and descriptions. And it's fantastic for that. It helps organize the story to create a framework that you use to tell the story. But for my new novel, where technical details are intrinsic to the story, it's a police procedural, I decided to write a personal synopsis because I felt like I wasn't quite ready to write the novel. So I thought I'd share with you how it helped, and I'm really very enthusiastic about this process. It may not be for everybody, but I wanted to share my personal experience. So the personal synopsis is a sequence of events with notes about character, actions, and feelings. Mainly, it's the sequence of events, so you're going along, you know what your story beats are, but you're going along and you're kind of filling in the story of the story beats, if that makes sense. So it's a very freeing process. I wanted to get the story from my head before I started writing chapter by chapter, and I went back to the old-fashioned notebook and pen. It's paper, pen, for recording my thoughts. When I write on a computer, I tend to self-edit as I go, and I'm correcting spelling, and I'm switching the sentences, and oh my gosh, I have a split infinitive. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff with a personal synopsis. The idea of the personal synopsis is to generate and enrich the story ideas, and it's only for you, so you don't have to worry about formatting or any of those things. Whether you're writing a complete sentence or not, it doesn't matter. None of those things matter. Whereas when you're actually writing a scene or writing a chapter for your novel, those things matter, and they they can interfere with the story flow in your head. So that's why I like this process. Um, so mainly the handwritten synopsis is recording the story ideas. Um, so so sentence fragments work. It doesn't matter. It's just notes to yourself, as it were. So Matt calls, date is off, going to Washington, D.C., Jane relief. Okay, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to happen when I actually write that sequence in the chapter. But for now, I want to get the sequence of the story idea and what happens and then what's going to happen next. So that's all I need for this tiny part of a scene in the synopsis. My detective is driving along the Russian River heading toward a new murder investigations, and she knows she has to call off the date because now she's going to be busy, and once again she won't be available to her partner, boyfriend, whatever you want to, however you want to label that. So in the synopsis, I don't describe the weather, which is actually going to be very important in the story later. And I don't describe the Russian River. I don't describe how long it takes to get from Santa Rosa to this near the coast small town along the river, or the beauty of the almost spring day. None of those things are in the synopsis. Those are details I'm going to add when I'm actually writing the story. The synopsis is capturing the flow of the story. This happens and that happens, and then, oh my goodness, this happens, and now things are turned upside down. The goal is to get the events in sequence and the people in each scene as the ideas flow from my head. And part of this process, an important part of it, is actually writing by hand. Handwriting stimulates free flow thought. There's a direct connection between your hand and your brain as you write that does not happen when you're typing. So it goes. So what I like about this process is after I've filled in the scene cards, I'm using Plotter once again, on the computer, the synopsis is great for getting the structure really nailed down in the story sequence and who's there. So handwriting the synopsis really, it's like nailing down the flow of the story. But as I go, I also discover enriching dimensions to the story that I hadn't thought of while I was just writing in the scene cards. This happens and Joe's there and Mary's not there, things like that. Okay, so here are some of the things I discovered in this handwritten synopsis process. I discover more character attributes because a character has to perform, as it were, in this section of the story, and they need certain attributes to perform, and that's every character. I learn more about them as I'm writing this synopsis. And also, although I just told you I don't write about any of those details like the weather, describing the Russian River as examples, but as the story flows in the synopsis, there are setting details. I'm like, oh, I need to, add this, or, the darkness of the redwood trees, or whatever it is. And I want to put those in my notes for the synopsis, so I make sure that I include those specific details in that particular scene. Also, I discovered a couple of missing characters that I needed to add to the cast of characters in my story because they perform certain roles in the story. I also discover cause and effect situations, like, especially for writing a mystery, setup early and the consequences later. I'm discovering more setup details and ways to set up discoveries that happen later in the story. Um, I also discover details that need further research, and oh my gosh, I've got to find out about this. Is this computer always in her car? So when she takes off, she's got her computer with her. Um, so I want to double check those things. What is actually in a detective's car, their vehicle? Because a detective's vehicle is different from what we think of as a squad car, or the black and whites we see on the street. So I want to get those details nailed down. Also, I discovered as the story flows that I might have original character details that I had as I was writing those character backgrounds before I started the synopsis. And then, as I'm writing in the story, I'm like, you know what? That just doesn't work for this story. So I need to give this character more of something else, or take away this attribute that I thought was so cool, and now I realize it just doesn't fit in the story. So there's a lot of discovery process that happens while you're writing the synopsis. And of course, also, there are new complications. It's something about the flow that happens in your brain as you're handwriting. It's a very creative process, and those new ideas come. In the story flow as you're handwriting, and these added dimensions come as I'm writing. And it's going into the story, but going into the story without having to worry about writing the story, the sentences, the paragraphs, and does this dialogue work, all of that sort of stuff. That comes later when I'm actually writing the story. The synopsis is about the flow of the story. It's like learning the story as I go without trying to fit in description and dialogue. I just want to learn the story. I want to nail that story. Okay, so essentially what the synopsis does is get me down to the story essence. The idea of writing a synopsis I actually borrowed from my screenwriting friends. There are other novelists who actually write a synopsis before they start writing, and since this is the first time I've done this, I'm really appreciating this process. The synopsis is essentially just the story. There's no breaking into chapters, and the focus is getting and the flow of the story from beginning to end, and how each scene feeds into the next scene. And one of the benefits of this is, of course, each scene is going to be moving that story forward, so you can eliminate scenes that don't work before you start writing. It's just me writing and refining the story as I go. And as I go, I write the story from beginning to end. It's the bare story without refinements. And it's, I guess you could call it's a draft of the novel's first draft. So that's one of the things I like about it. I really get that story firmed up in my head. So for some writers, writing a synopsis before the first draft may feel like extra work. But the personal synopsis will actually save you rewriting time at the other end. If you really have your story down, you won't be spending so much time working on that first draft and taking scenes out or adding scenes that that you forgot, filling in those plot holes. The synopsis helps you think through the story so you don't need as many revisions after that first draft. So it just depends on where you want to spend your time. The synopsis helps you learn the story before you create the first draft, and you minimize those plot holes and avoid extra scenes. And the process of writing by hand increases neural activity in the brain. That's what stimulates it. It's so different than staring at screen cards in Scrivener or the scene notes in Plotter. It's just a totally different process for your brain, and that's why the story flows with handwriting in a way that typing on a keyboard just doesn't do. So, highly recommend it for discovering your story. Fiction is all about story, and your personal synopsis guides you toward a deeper story beyond plot points and an outline. And as you tell the story to yourself, that's essentially what you're doing in a synopsis, you discover story elements as your brain nurtures that creative flow. So, if you're grappling with your story, a personal synopsis may be the answer to enhancing your story. And once you reach the end, you have your story elements in place to write your novel. Okay, I hope this helps you understand about writing that personal synopsis. And if you are struggling with your story, I highly recommend it. It's an amazing process. We're so used to computers and keyboards and looking at a screen, and the process of handwriting in a notebook is just very, very different, very stimulating, very creative. So thank you. I hope that helps. And if you're just getting into thinking about writing a mystery, check out Write a Killer Mystery. There's a link in the description below. It's a course tailored for beginning mystery writers to get you from the story idea to the end. All right, thank you, and keep writing.